Joining us now is Michael Seifert, who has just made some huge news. Public Square CEO Michael Seifert joins legal effort to defend religious freedom. Michael, welcome to the program. Tell us all about it.
Charlie, good to see you. Yes, we are happy to announce that yesterday we joined in a lawsuit in federal court with the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute, an incredible organization run by a true hero of our faith and our conservative values, against the HHS and the EEOC. And for those who are not familiar, that is the Health and Human Services and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission under the Biden administration. And the reason that we are filing this lawsuit to challenge those two departments that are really bureaucratic cesspools now that are vehemently anti-Christian in their practices is because under the Biden and Kamala administration, back in April, the EEOC issued a declaration that essentially said that employers are forced to utilize health care coverage that mandates the coverage of abortion care and of gender transition surgeries. The HHS also joined in interpreting a rule out of the Biden administration that was essentially a alteration of part of the Affordable Care Act that pushed forth the idea that whether you were on a group plan or a self-funded plan, which are really your only two options as an employer, you are mandated with your healthcare provider to cover gender reassignment surgeries. They reinterpreted the definition of sex to include abortion. So you're also forced to cover abortion as a company that is seeking to provide healthcare coverage for your employees. And not only is this an egregious act against all employers in our country, because it's a total distortion of what sex means, what life means. It is an egregious interpretation of law that was actually never supposed to mean this, but it also is directly in conflict with the Constitution and the desire that our religious liberties would be protected. It is our most fundamental right as Americans that our religious rights would not be infringed. That includes, as an employer, as an owner of a company, I should not be forced to provide and pay for, or force my employees to pay for, healthcare coverage that will infringe upon my deeply held religious beliefs and the religious beliefs of my employees. And right now, out of the Biden administration, after these rulings in April that pushed forward gender reassignment surgery, coverage of abortion, this is the position we find ourselves in, and we are wanting to put a stop to it.
So help me understand this. So the EEOC and the Department of Health and Human Services, without an act of Congress, can force you, a private company, to do what exactly? Just get as specific as you can.
Yep. So the EEOC issued a declaration that implements what's called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And this act actually started with good intentions. It was this idea that employers with 15 or more employees should accommodate female employees in regards to pregnancy and childbirth. We're all for that. In fact, we at Public Square give a baby bonus to new parents, $5,000 after taxes, because we support the expansion of families. Here's the problem. The EEOC bureaucracy has now essentially expanded this employer accommodation mandate to include female employees seeking abortion. So it used to be about ensuring that women could act on their desire to both have a career and to be a devoted mother. And that included paid time off that was set within certain standards. But now the EEOC has said, yeah, that Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act that was a law, we're going to interpret it with a different definition of what being fair means, and we're going to include abortion. And if you do not, we will penalize either the health insurance provider or the company. And then the HHS took it even further. They issued on April 25th of 2024 a new regulation interpreting Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. This section forbids discrimination in health programs in regard to sex. So it says that a health insurance provider or a company that is utilizing a healthcare plan, whether self-funded or a group plan, it was intended to say that you can't discriminate based upon sex, which means male or female. But the HHS said, no, that's not enough. We are going to reinterpret the definition of sex in the Affordable Care Act to mean and include termination of pregnancy and imposing with that a surgical and chemical abortion healthcare plan coverage mandate along with gender affirming care in their healthcare plans, which means that if we as an employer, or if our healthcare provider that we utilize for all of our employee plans refuses to offer puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, top and bottom surgeries, gender-conforming cosmetic surgery, and a host of other affirming practices paid for by the employer, that we are in violation of the Affordable Care Act as interpreted by the HHS. So they're essentially going around the law to reinterpret to harm our companies.
I believe, wasn't there some legal breakthrough on this when the Little Sisters of the Poor having to fund abortions? Is that correct, Michael? Is my memory right there?
You're right. And Hobby Lobby was also a very historically precedent-setting case related to employers being forced to pay for abortion coverage for employees. Unfortunately, the bureaucrats keep on at it, and they refuse to acknowledge historical case precedent that has laid the groundwork for two things predominantly. Number one, an employer should not be forced to violate their conscience or their religious beliefs in the effort to provide sustainable and helpful healthcare coverage to its employees. But the other thing is, this summer, Chevron doctrine was actually overturned in the Supreme Court. It was one of the biggest cases. You talked about this on your show. The Chevron deference ruling that actually overturned 50 years now of what was truly unconstitutional actions out of bureaucrats should apply here as well. We should see that bureaucrats are no longer able to interpret the law to further their own agenda and then enforce that interpretation outside of the confines of what the legislation has already deemed the law. And so, Charlie, the reason we feel a great deal of confidence about this case is exactly what you just mentioned. We have history on our side and we have the Constitution on our side. The Supreme Court has ruled multiple times that employers like ours are not subject to the violation of our religious beliefs in order to provide health care coverage to our employees. The Biden administration has tried to double down. And what they're trying to do here ultimately is they're trying to test folks to see if anybody will push at them in their hopes that they can hopefully reverse case precedent and have a new ruling that says, no, you know what? The court's now ruled in our favor and we can mandate gender affirming care, what they call it, which is actually body mutilation. And they also want to establish that abortion, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, which thank God it has been, it's not enough for them to say, okay, well, it goes back to the states. What they're trying to do now is say, well, we're going to go around the law to ensure that at least in corporate America, we can have them by a stranglehold and ensure that abortions are still funded and that the industry is strong. So this is them utilizing action out of the executive branch and out of a fourth branch of government, which is the unelected bureaucracy, in order to punish anybody that stands against the regime that is deeply held to their religious beliefs. And we're caught in the crossfire here, and we're taking a stand.
No, so Michael, this is so instructive. Can you also just educate our audience on why you guys at Public Square feel so convicted to do this? Because you represent a community of other businesses. You are kind of the vanguard and the tip of the spear on behalf of, I mean, I hate to say you're like the Chamber of Commerce, but this is what the Chamber of Commerce should be doing if it wasn't what it is now. Can you talk about that? Because you're a representative of over 800,000 vendors and businesses.
Yeah, we actually have a network of about 5 million consumers that are also often very active employees. We have over 85,000 business vendors on Public Square alone that trust us to be their voice. And you're right. Entities like the Chamber of Commerce for a long time tried to tout themselves as the champion of small business, the champion of employers, and they were going to help businesses stand on sturdy footing and fight the battles of the time that were necessary to ensure their survival. But the Chamber of Commerce now has become a globalist-run cesspool that is more beholden to K Street, Wall Street, and 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, rather than an entity that is championing their original charter. They also are massively in favor of illegal immigration. They're in favor of abortion. And all of these practices harm the small businesses that we have really felt a calling to represent. So number one, Charlie, is you're right. We want to be a voice for small businesses that maybe don't have the manpower, or they don't have the time to be able to fight these legislative battles or these judicial battles that can hopefully secure their freedoms in the long term. The other reason we do this is because over 60% of our, actually over 67%, Charlie, of our ownership in our company, even as a publicly traded company, is actually held by Christians. Over 67% of voting rights at our company is represented by deeply devoted people of faith that would declare that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior. And when they invest in our company, they hope that we will fight the battles. They hope that we will take a stand to ensure that we as a company are not funding healthcare plans that actually act completely antithetical to our values. And so we're doing this not just for our merchants and for our consumers that trust us to be their voice. We're also doing this for the investors. And the final thing I'll say, Charlie, we're doing this because I couldn't sleep at night if we didn't. From the beginning of our company, we named it Public Square because when Jesus is talking to Simon Peter in Matthew 15, and he's looking at this rock in Israel, and he's pointing to it, and there's a gate at the bottom of the rock, a big cavern, and they used to call that Hades. And Jesus said, Simon Peter, on this rock, I will build my ecclesia. That's what he said. And that word in Greek, ecclesia, we've sort of thought of as the church. But if you actually translate that to a modern translation, the closest mirroring of that word actually means the public square. When Jesus was looking at Peter, he says, on this rock, I will build my public square. It means not just four walls of a church. It means that your faith conviction should go out everywhere in society and should impact your business, the way you employ people, the way you serve your customers and your merchants. And so for us, Charlie, we have to do this because it is honoring the original convictions that built our business, that named it Public Square in the first place. And I need to know for the future of our economy, with blessed assurance, that employers like me, and there are millions of them, are not going to be forced to violate our convictions in order to produce a healthy business.